call tonight's work session to order. And we only have one discussion item on the agenda, the continuum of services. I will kick it off to our superintendent of the year. I'm going to keep saying that so he can open it for us.
Thank you, President Malone. So this is our third time coming back to you in a work session format about the continuum of services. I think we've done a nice job of identifying some problems, solutions we've employed coming into the year, solutions we've entertained since the start of the year, and also some ideas about ongoing engagement that we've shared with staff. And so tonight we really kind of wanted to walk you through what that continuum is again, and then our application of that, what that kind of looks and feels like in some of our buildings, and then also some quick follow-up on the comprehensive behavior approach in CBA and some of the draft work we've been doing on that. We had shared you an example once before, and Lauren Kate have some a slide or two there at the end of the presentation to talk to you about with that too. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chase, and he'll get us into the presentation.
Well, good evening. Nice to be with you all this evening. And as the superintendent kind of laid out our plan for this evening, but just to give it a little bit more specifics is obviously this work that we're doing is, it takes time, and there's a time involved in all the process, and we have made some good gains. But you know, as we talk about IEPs to start and then go on to our use of the continuum, and as Matt said, finish up with the changes to the CBA, really, as an IEP says, it's an individualized education plan. And we first presented data to you last spring, and then we recapped that at the beginning of the school year. And one of the things that Ashley's done some nice work on that she's going to talk about is this beginning work about making sure that our IEPs match the needs of our students. But as the title suggests, those are individual meetings. And so as we're not even halfway through the year, some of the progress as we do that learning and that work with our teams is something that we are looking long-term, not just short-term on. So the data is not going to show wide variances from what we showed you last spring, and that's a good thing. That means we're not knee-jerk reacting, right? That we're taking an approach that is individualized to our students. And so beyond that data, one of the discussions we want to have, you and I, are just the questions that are coming to us as we look at this, as we do our work, as we put new systems into place. What are the things that we're taking time to consider about how we best move this work forward? It ties in nicely to the presentation we just saw, especially as you look at that cut score and how close we are to that, and some of the things we're seeing that are being put on us from the state. And so not so much new data tonight as much as conversation about the processes that we're using and the questions that we're considering and the things that we think are helping us move this work forward, but also pieces that are making us kind of take our time and say, okay, are we really looking in the right area that we do this? And so you'll hear from Ashley tonight. You'll hear a little bit more from me and some from Eliza as well. And then we will give you a quick preview of what we're going to bring to you back during P&G in January related to the CBA. A little bit different the last third of the presentation, but we think it's important to preview that before we leave for break. So I'll let Ashley.
So we wanted to start by providing you some of the slides that we presented to our entire staff. We had shared with you we were going to do kind of some universal learning with our district team to be able to share their role in the IEP process. So we've been really working with our all teachers, so specials teachers, classroom teachers, special education teachers, support team members, to really understand what is an IEP meeting process. So that, as Chase said, it really is around that individualization and designing an educational plan for that student, and then the plan itself, right? So how will that be implemented and supported by all those supporting team members? And everyone has a critical voice in that. So we've also been really focused on what is that collaboration and communication, both at the IEP table, but before the IEP meeting, and then after the IEP meeting. How are we centering on our students and making sure that we're making student-centered and data-driven decisions? How are we leading on the expertise and accountability of all critical team members? So every person at that table brings a critical voice to engage in their knowledge and expertise, but also supporting that student in getting the best outcomes possible. And then partnering with our colleagues and with families so that we have that shared collective ownership and trust and transparency in all processes. So a lot of that work has been around first identifying who the people at the table are, how do we partner intentionally, and then understanding what our continuum of services is so we can make good decisions. So this visual is one that is probably familiar to you now. We've shared it with you a few times, but is intended to be a snapshot or a representation of kind of that continuum of services. And a student may navigate this continuum of services throughout the day. They may be in just one part of the continuum of services for the whole day. Again, that's the purpose of that IEP team and their decision making. So jumping right into some of the data we've pulled for you today, prior to sharing this data, a couple things I want to highlight in regards to how we pulled the information. So our data is pulled from two data sources. Our Tableau data dashboard is what pulled our total student population, and then the different IEP data sets were pulled from Achieve, which is the state platform, and that was pulled on December 4th. One thing I'd want to highlight is you will notice some disparity in the total numbers, and that is due to when we pulled it, there are roughly 260 IEPs that were open, and so when they're open, we're not able to pull the student information, so the weighted score or the LRE. And so that's why you'll notice some discrepancy from what we've said is our total number of students with IEPs versus what we're reporting out in regards to weighted enrollment and the LRE information. So this first tab really talks about the weighted enrollment, and as a reminder, our students are typically weighted level 1, level 2, or level 3. Level 3 equals the most intensive needs, level 1 is the less intensive needs, and then you'll also see those RS, R1, R2. Those are services we provide, we oversee but don't directly provide. So an example would be a student who has a speech-only goal, so they receive SLP services. We contract those services through Grantwood AEA, but we don't directly provide any of them, so therefore we don't receive funding. So this is the distribution of our students by that weighting. And then this takes our students, again, this year, those that we had access to IEPs that were submitted and implemented. So again, there was about 260 that were open that are not represented here. And identifies the amount of time based on their IEPs they spend in Gen Ed. One thing we would want to note is this graph does not include our preschool students. Our preschool student programming is fully inclusive, so all students are in Gen Ed all day. And so that is 115 of our students, of the 250 students that we had said were 100% in Gen Ed. The remainder of those total students, a lot of them would be those, the categories under R, so those supplemental services, so speech only, deaf services only, etc. And then here you can see the same information, but that has our preschool students included. So then, as Chase said earlier, we did want to be able to demonstrate kind of a year-to-year comparison. This information is not necessarily indicative of the work we're doing, in my opinion, but I do think having this data set, especially if we continue to monitor this over the next 3 to 5 years, I do think it'll help provide just another representation of kind of our services, our student needs, and how are we implementing our continuum of services. What I would want to highlight is that while we don't see big shifts between these, I would say that anecdotally, we have found with our district data team opportunities to engage with our buildings in a really intentional way around student need, and is your IEP matching your student need? How can we support you in looking at those services and supports? And I think what we're feeling is success in those student by student conversations and the work, but you won't see it yet represented in the data here. In addition to that, similar to what I was sharing earlier, how are we then deploying resources and supports when our district data team is identifying outliers in our data, so an uptick in student behavior resulting in aggression towards staff or students, or significant increase in office referral. And one of the resources and supports we're able to deploy is our SEDH team, our special education SEDH team. And we've continued to enhance our flexibility in how we respond. So we used to only be able to provide, we used to narrow the scope of our work to just complex direct support. So those were our very, very tippy-top students that, they're honestly the students Matt was referring earlier to, that many districts don't serve, but that our district does. We really mean we're all in for all kids, and there are tippy-top students. So that's the complex and direct support used to be the only kind of student population that we would deploy this level of support to. We've now added 2 other support models, that quick care and consultative services. I talked to you a little bit about that last time we came together. And the intent of that is to be responsive to what is our data telling us and where might we need to just temporarily or for a period of time provide some more intensive support and resources, whether that be a behavior interventionist, some training from some of the skilled members of our team, some modeling, coaching, data collection, or updating the students' plans are all ways we can come in and work with the team and teachers. And so you'll see here this year, this represents the amount of students that we have served in these various models to deploy additional resources and supports to. And I think similarly also represents the difference between elementary and secondary, which I also think is important to highlight, because what we've identified in other conversations with you is that we're really feeling that intensive student need in our kind of pre-K to first grade. And you see that highlighted here, that we're feeling a need to be more responsive at elementary and deploy additional resources based on the data.
Thanks, Ashley. And we can come back and talk more about the data, but as we've looked at the data and done this work over the last year and a half, some of the questions that have come to our mind and we continue to work through, you see on the screen. And Eliza's going to talk to you here in a little bit about how we work through those and how we continue to consider them. But just to dig into these a little bit, it goes to some of the things I was talking about earlier about how we look at the data and where we focus our efforts. And really starting that first one, I mean, it relates back to the presentation that Lucas just gave earlier. 37% of the districts, right, are facing challenges with achievement and their special ed students. And so it's not something that we're unique in the work that we're doing. As Matt said, we're 2.5% below the cut score. And I mean, are there things that we could probably manufacture or environments where we could focus students in that subgroup to get that up? Possibly. But is that what's best for our students? And are we making sure that those students are in the least restrictive environment and gaining all the things we know are good for kids through school? Likewise, several of you were around the table in one capacity or other when the DE came into the district several years ago, and we were designated in certain areas under IDEA or Part B, and so those pieces always weigh into the equation when we're trying to do this work. And whether or not it's subconsciously or very directly, it is difficult when we're trying to balance some of those pieces. And maybe it shouldn't be, but I think that's the reality of where we are as a district, that's always at play about where we are in alignment with the state and even with the federal level when we talk about our students with special needs and how we best serve them. But then as we look at our specific levels, is there alignment between our student weighted enrollment factors and the percentage of time in general education? Slides 7 and 8 Ashley showed you both with preschool enrollment and without it, the percentage of time that students were in there, but what is not correlated there is where is that level? And so as we look at that, we begin to try to unpack that to see if we can bring some determinations about what the correlation there is and where do we focus those efforts. Again, do we look at the entire spectrum, or are we able to pinpoint certain areas, whether it's the level of that weighted enrollment level for our students, or perhaps is it a grade band? As we've expanded our preschool, full inclusion at preschool, and so on, I think it was slide 9, we showed that year-over-year comparison, and there was an uptick of students that were in the general ed classroom 100% of the time. Well, that's to be expected as we would expand our preschool program because we're bringing more students into the system. So even if we are identifying some of our students with the most challenging needs at the top, that number might be smaller than the number of students that are coming into our general ed classroom at the preschool level. And so continuing to further dissect our data to make sure that we are taking the most effective approach to going back to where Ashley started, best support and address the individualized needs of every student. It is not as simple as using a broad brush. We have to look at this from that individual student level, individual grade level, individual building level as you move this work forward. And so here, after Eliza goes through some of the things that we're doing, we really invite you as we do the discussion to share with us the questions that you see in the data, and those are the things that you'd like us to look at, because we really believe this is an important part of what we're doing. Not just trying to figure out a solution, but the why behind that solution and the how we get there to make sure that we're supporting students along that way. And with that, I'll turn it over to Eliza to talk about some of the how that's going into that work right now.
Yeah, so some of the ongoing work, last meeting, and 2 meetings ago, we had talked about our district level data review team, as well as our building level review teams. And so what we are doing in those is really working to identify our buildings that have higher concentrations of students that are needing those intensive supports. So if you don't need to go back, but when Ashley was showing the consultative support or the quick support, that direct support, when we're noticing that there's a building that's tapping into several higher level supports, then we are going in and wrapping our support around those individual buildings. We're noticing that we're seeing a higher number of students that might have physical aggression with injury. So we're looking at that, then we're reviewing IEPs for those particular students. We're thinking, is there a match between their services as they're written in the IEP and the behavior actions that we're seeing in our office referrals? And when we're identifying that those are not in alignment, we're then reaching out to the school-based team and saying, okay, how can we support you? If we're noticing that there's a discrepancy there, we might need to look at utilizing other parts of the continuum for that specific student. That is actually an example from our meeting 2 months ago, where we had one building that had a higher number of physical aggression with injury, and so we dug into those, identified that they were coming from 3 specific students. Ashley was able to pull those 3 specific student IEPs with the building principal. We reviewed those 2. We felt like they had already had their wheels in the motion. The other one, they were like, okay, student just started. We have this plan. And so for that, and then they felt like, okay, people know what's happening. We've been able to provide support. We were able to go in and provide just some different suggestions and ideas and supports through their lead support teacher. And so we feel like just the ability to look at a lot of different pieces of data and compare those and kind of overlay them, we're able to provide building level support in a much more systematic and a quicker way. Special education data is included in our monthly review by that district support team that we're talking about. Which also is something I'm super proud of, is through that district support team, we reported this last month, that a majority of our office referrals are coming from our youngest learners as they're learning how to assimilate into a classroom environment. They're learning how to wait, which is really hard. Take turns, also really hard. And just executive functioning is something that our youngest learners are really working to develop. And so what we did is Nick and I pulled together one kindergarten teacher from each of our 20 buildings, and Brady joined us, and we've started this kindergarten collaboration group focusing on that transition between preschool and kindergarten. So it was an absolute wonderful hour with them, and we talked about the things that are going well in kindergarten, the things that are challenging, small quick fixes, and larger programmatic fixes. So we feel like we've got a good idea of where our kindergarten teachers are feeling the pinch and where they're feeling the stress, and different things that we can do, and they are all in on being part of the solution. And so that's been really fun, which has come through that district level support team. It's easy for us here to say, oh, we think this might be the thing, but we're not the ones that are doing the work every day. And so hearing from them, getting their input, and having them be a part of the solution, I think will help us make sure that we're targeting the right things. And also building some dashboards for both district and building level so that they can look at their least restrictive environment distribution, their weighted totals, their tier 3 SEBH caseload, so students that they have just get that larger picture, because sometimes buildings will be like, things are feeling like they're on fire. And we'll look and it's like they need 1 or 2 students and we can support that. Or it might really be like 5 or 6 students that we can provide an entire system of support. So building those things so data is easier for them to look at. And then of course committing to regular updates back to you all, using those same metrics so that we can continue to monitor those trends over time. Where are we seeing growth? Where are we not? What might we need to do so that we're making course corrections all the time instead of waiting until the end of a year or an end of a trimester. We are reviewing these things consistently.
Alexa,
yeah.
can I just have,
Please.
just to applaud all of the work, but really the kindergarten just amplified. The kindergarten group, it was smart, it was great engagement, it's going to be impactful. So I would just say thanks to you and Nick on behalf of staff. It's awesome.
Thank you. We had some really positive feedback from the teachers that just
Yeah,
felt like their
absolutely.
voices were heard.
Absolutely.
They were excited to come into they left really positive, talking about really hard stuff. And that always feels good. And a lot of emails like, I want to be a part of the solution. So that
And the kindergarten teacher in Eliza came back
Yeah,
out.
she was back. She was back.
Just a smidge there.
It's hard.
Mine showed up a little bit.
It's hard to take her away. It's hard to take her away. Thank you, Brady. And so again, more of the ongoing work is to clarify the continuum of decision making. So again, those quick reference tools for the teams to be able to use to make sure that they really truly understand. We can show them that graphic of the continuum, but providing examples of what might this look like, and also making sure that we're explaining to teams and families that a student might live in very different places of that continuum. Ashley put it earlier, throughout the day, throughout the year, that just because you might move one way or another on the continuum doesn't mean that that's what your student's program is going to be forever. And that's what we really want to make sure our families understand, that if a student's experiencing maybe some more challenging times, we might need to try something that's more restrictive, but we're going to collect data on it, we're going to monitor it, and then our goal is to always try to move, fluidly on that to make sure that we're meeting that student's need at that point in time. Continuing to work with our principals and staff about the use of the continuum to make sure they can understand how to advocate for their students. Our teachers are our experts, our parents are the experts to make sure they understand what the continuum can offer so that they're able to advocate for their students when they're in those meetings. And then next, also program evaluation. So throughout this spring and the fall of next year, we're continuing to look at what changes that we might need to make to improve our academic and behavior outcomes. We're looking at injuries. We look at them monthly. Nick and his team look at them daily, actually, as they roll in. And we are going back and checking in with employees, checking in with the school team. What do we need? What do we need to change? And then Ashley and I are excited this year, and then Lucas and Ashley will also do the same thing of having just individual meetings with each principal to review their LRE, so that least restrictive environment placement, and the weighting of students to understand how effectively students are being supported in that least restrictive environment. So allowing them that opportunity to have all ears with just the two of us, so like, this is what's feeling hard, or I'm not sure about this one, or we need help, and then making sure that we've got the correct people supporting them.
Just checking our acronyms, making sure we
Make sure
spelled
it's
them out
spelled out.
before.
Yeah.
Well, I wasn't quite sure, so I was saying the whole word.
We spelled it out.
Yep.
So that leads to me. So we know that, as you heard, there's several things that we're doing to be proactive to wrap around students and even respond to some student behaviors to try to help them, help educate them, help just give them what they need. But there's going to be times when we have to discipline students. And so just a couple of updates around discipline of students who make threats of violence. Well, first of all, we revised our 503-8 board policy, which is that policy that we had to put in place from the legislation that says schools need to map out how they're disciplining students, like level by level, how, so on and so forth. And so originally we took a template that was provided to the DE by the Department of Education, and we kind of just adopted it because it matched. However, it was inverted. So like the levels 3, 2, 1, that's not how we label ours. So not, for us, level 1 is most egregious. and then level 2 is middle, and then level 3 is least egregious. So we just inverted those numbers to match what we have in our comprehensive behavior approach plan. And so that's a change that you all will see as we're coming up on 500s. But then also, we know just based on past meetings and hearing from the public, so on and so forth, hearing from staff, that there is a desire to see more around staff who are injured. And so we're proposing a change in our comprehensive behavior approach plan to highlight or kind of like pull out a section specifically dedicated to staff who are injured. So like physical aggression towards staff. And so I'll show you what our best thinking is today. And so this is what the top portion of that will look like in our CBA. Again, this is draft language. This is our best thinking today. It's a proposal of sorts, but basically spelling out physical aggression without injury, with serious bodily injury, which is how it's outlined and how our data is pulled for the state. And so those are the 3 categories. I know that there have been questions in the past around the term assault, but that's not how we talk about it statewide, so we're sticking with how the state talks about it. And as you can kind of see what those definitions are, and then what we're expecting of our administration when staff are injured. And ultimately, we want them to go to the nurse right away. We want them to go to the school nurse right away, report it, and that school nurse, our HR team has been working with our nurses so that they can understand that they need to put a report in place, and they have the links and know what to do. And then also they might suggest that they go to urgent care or so on and so forth. And only you would get with serious bodily injury if that staff member then leaves that nurse and has to go to urgent care or the hospital or somewhere else. That's what that's reserved for. So here's what it would look like in our comprehensive behavior approach. This is what the principals would see. And as you can see, that level 1, most egregious in red, and then 2, and then 3. Right now, it's drafted for both elementary and secondary. This is a change because normally we'll have elementary one way and secondary, and normally elementary is a little less punitive in the amount of days suggested for out-of-school suspension. But here you can see we're keeping it the same, just to kind of really highlight the fact that we're serious about our students learning that you cannot assault the staff. You can't physically harm the staff. And so that's our best thinking today. Any questions?
Can we go back up 2 slides back? Sorry. Yeah. So, of course, I know deciding if you need medical attention, is really different for different people,
That's why we want the nurse involved.
Right. But even if the nurse says, oh, you should go have that bite checked out, people are going to say no. So that's just, there's no way around it, but it's just going to be inherent that some people are not going to want to go get medical attention every time.
So true.
And one of the nice things I would say, just being on the receiving end of getting many of these things, our nurses are doing just a fantastic job.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
Of just communicating, and also then communicating when someone may have been more injured than they were willing to indicate. Molly, I'm sure you've done that in a situation yourself, where they go, I'm fine, whatever, I'm fine.
Right.
And our nurses are doing a great job. And if nothing else, we've been able to follow them trends from a separate point of view, different from the CBA component, but kind of from a different conversation we've had, which has been really helpful.
Yeah, I really like that there's a separate, kind of a pulled out policy for staff. I just think that's super important to do. Yeah.
That's good feedback.
Makes
Because
a
we
really
went back
good-
and forth about that a little bit.
I think that's really important, makes it's supportive of our staff, I think, and their concerns, so.
What changes are being done for the policy to protect students?
When you say protect students.
Well, there's like 3 slides back. Are we doing anything to change policies with regard to violence to students? Or are we leaving that one largely the same? Outside of just the
Like student-to-student violence.
student-to-student violence?
Oh, yeah, so
Thank you, Molly.
we had already done some work on that, and it's like a live document for us. So we keep looking at it to make sure. We did a lot of work over the summer leading up to this year with the with Lucas, Eliza, Kate, some other people on the exec cabinet in regards to making sure that we weren't too punitive, but that we were, you know, making sure that we were getting the message across, for some, especially for some more egregious things.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we keep looking at that. And like we said, we're even not done. Like we already have had conversations about things that we might do to revise it in the future.
The most recent revisions took place last spring after we had work groups with administrators, where we reviewed not only the CBA itself, but what are the responses that are required of the buildings. We just got done today that when those infractions do occur, like what's the expectation for buildings when a student comes back. So we talked a lot about restorative reentry, which is key to when a student comes back after being gone for a day or two. What does that look like when entering and welcoming that student back in? So in addition to revising kind of the days that we looked at, we've also revised the expectations for our building staff welcoming the student back in.
And Kate kind of lives and breathes the CBA world, so I invited her just in case there were questions, to be honest.
Lucky you to live and breathe.
I guess I'm really encouraged to hear that your work is going to lead to teachers, parents, and other building staff having a response very quickly when a student is violent towards them to any degree. Because I think that's one of the things that I heard, particularly at our comment periods, that staff were wanting much more to be done. So I think that'll help a lot. And also I think we hear a good many stories from parents that say that we don't handle student-to-student violence particularly well. So the things that Rich is getting at are things that I think will help us a whole lot as we go forward. So to me, this sounds like very good work so far.
I guess I don't want to just let that one go, Director Easton, without a response. I mean, I do feel like we've been very, our use of the online learning program, while not controversial, has been a really effective deterrent for student-to-student violence and repeated fights. That has worked significantly well to reduce that number. That was something we did coming out of COVID. Kids will verbalize to teachers, to other kids, to administrators that they're not going to because of that. And so we needed a slow down mechanism before they continue to engage in that. And so there are other things, and I'm sure there's other examples. We don't use it widely at the middle school level, and so there's constant work we do there. Of course, we didn't land in this conversation because of the student-to-student piece, but I just want to keep that in everybody's memory because that has been an important step for us. And the other thing, right, just as we talk about this, that I think we all need to continue to remember, while that CBA part is important at the end, we know in most of these situations we're talking about, it's not an effective deterrent, right? That's not the intention for it. We're talking about our youngest learners. We know that, a suspension at that age, even if there's some type of time we need to regroup the plan to create some distance from school, that's not what's going to likely change the behavior. Our adults may need that. That student may need some time away from school, so the adults can be better prepared and have a plan. But I think keeping that in our community's mind and making sure when we're having those conversations with people, they understand that too, because it is a complex problem, as you can tell as we've looked through the data and looked at complex solutions. So we can't let other voices simplify that problem into something that it's not, right? And I think that's part of our job, knowing more about it, is making sure that people can fully understand the challenge in front of us.
And we do those restorative reentries K-12. So like I remember helping out over at Horn for first grader, and we just adjusted. We're using visuals. We're using, like we're drawing, and we're like getting to where that student can understand what's going on. Those reentries are helpful in making sure that the student knows you made a mistake, but you're welcome back here. We also have an appeal process, Charlie, or whoever. Like if you're hearing from families say, my child was, this was an injustice, I don't agree, that's why we have an appeal process. They can definitely email up and go through that appeal process. And Lucas and Eliza have worked for our administration around like when they are like, how many days should I suspend? I want to do this many days, and they've helped to guide them. Kate's helped guide. So, you know, there's a process. We don't, you know, like we're here. We are responsive.
Yeah, and I think I know that. I think I've known that. But, you know, as you know, there are a lot of parents and students that don't quite understand what's available to them and what we're trying to do in response to the incidences. So we hear, you know, one story that we know is not complete. So, Kristen, figure out a way to
I'm on it, Charlie.
Amy, I don't want to cut people off, but somebody pause. Any other questions or discussion items for the team?
Just to put a bow or wrap up what Laura said, remember that draft language will come to P&G as part of the 500s in January. So we'll actually provide you all the policies to provide any sorts of, you know, language modifications we might want to see there. And so that one is not something we'll just implement or start to roll out. It will come as part of the next policy update in January.
Do you think we could, as part of that presentation, present an incidence study that doesn't identify kids at all, or doesn't identify anyone? Because, you know, those stories make a lot of difference in how what we're trying to communicate is received.
So basically kind of give some examples, some case studies of how we work the process without identifying the students.
Yeah, well, right.
I think we can do that. Pick out a couple at varying levels and try to, you know, walk the board through some of the things that Laura and the team have been talking about of how we make those decisions or how something falls into level 1 as opposed to a level 3. We can absolutely.
We do that with our administrators. Yeah, we do some training that way with them, show them some different situations and have them small talk about how they would do that. So we could definitely walk through that.
Other board members may not be interested in this, but
No, I think that's a good idea, and it's good for the public too, not just us, but.
All right. If there's nothing else, I would entertain a motion for adjournment.
so moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Have a great winter break.